All right, so welcome. Thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Ashley Hawkins. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Studio 23. I recognize a lot of you in this space tonight, but if this is your first time, we're a nonprofit community art space, and our mission is to empower artists to make art and make change. We're home to about 115 artists who all have 24/7 access to this space to make their own artwork. So after we wrap up tonight, if you'd like to kind of check out the print shops downstairs and see artists working in real life, please do. We've been around for 15 years, but we just bought this building in November of 2022 and moved in late 2023. And we've had about 30,000 people through this community event space since then at free community events that we host every month. So those events include discussions like this evening's and like the LGBTQ AI community discussion we had a couple weeks back. They also include square dancing, field trips for local schools, artist markets, film screenings, organizing meetings, and countless other things. So if you're a community organization or group looking for a space to meet, please do reach out to us. We're trying to make this space open and available to as many folks as possible. In exciting news, what is right now a lot beside our building. This spring and summer, we're developing into a community green space with a $50,000 grant from the City of Richmond's Neighborhood Climate Resilience Grant. So thanks, y'all. So we're hoping, in addition to being able to welcome you into this interior space, that you'll be here to join us for our green space outside sometime soon, when the weather is not quite so frigid and awful. We're here tonight because, like many of you all, I assume, we're overwhelmed and stressed out and inundated with the executive orders coming from this administration and how they're going to impact us. As Studio 23, we've lost a $200,000 grant that was going to do energy efficient improvements on this building that we'd been working on for over a year. And with an organization with a staff of 4 people, that was a huge amount of time and effort, a huge amount of money that we simply don't have in the bank to do these improvements now. And so, on top of everything else that we're seeing, their local organizations and groups are really struggling. So it feels good tonight to see you all here in solidarity, to learn what's coming up nationally, what's coming up statewide, what we can do locally, what resources are available to us, and you'll see folks in the back who are some of those resources. So if you haven't visited our tabling folks, please do. And we are also recording tonight's discussion, and we'll share that link out with everybody. So if you know folks that wanted to be here in person but they couldn't make it, we'll make that available. And that is thanks to our friends Joey and Aaron with Double Take. They're incredible. If you need anything recorded, maybe not anything, guys, but you can reach out, they'll tell you. A couple of quick housekeeping items. Our restrooms are multi-stalled and non-gendered. They're downstairs, accessible via the elevator or the stairs. 1115 Mobile Kitchen is out front if you're feeling hungry. Feel free to grab some food and bring it back in here and eat. We know it's nigh on the dinner hour. There's bottled water and seltzer water up front for y'all, so please help yourself, that's free. If you have any questions this evening regarding Studio 23 or logistics, anything else that you need help with, you can reach out to Barry, KB, who's in the back in the hat, or I. And we will be breaking apart after the panel discussion to just kind of convene with one another to talk, to share resources, ideas, lament, scream into the void. So feel free to hang out after the panel discussion. I think that's it for housekeeping. Barry, anything? Okay, well, on that note, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Barry O'Keefe, who's going to be our moderator for this discussion this evening, and he'll go ahead and introduce our wonderful panelists. You ready, Barry? You ready to party?
Are these mics on?
Not yet.
I'm going to hand them out to just like whoever. Sick. Hello, my name is Barry O'Keefe. I'm on staff here at Studio 23 and have done some work with different climate organizations in the city at different times. I'm going to be moderating tonight. I'm going to let these folks introduce themselves in detail in a moment, but coming down the line from this side, we have Diana Jay, who is the Deputy Director of Strategy and Governance at Clean Virginia. We have Michael Smart, who is the Sustainability Engagement Coordinator at the Richmond City Office of Sustainability. We have Jenny Morand, the Central Virginia Field Manager at the Virginia League of Conservation Voters, and we have the Reverend Dr. Faith Harris, who's the Executive Director of Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. So we're going to start off by just having each of these wonderful people do like a brief 10-minute intro to who they are, what their organizations are all about, and the view from where they sit in this moment, what is at stake, what is important, where is the focus of their attention. Diana, you want to start us off?
Sure. Okay, can you hear me? All right. Well, I'm feeling the need for that energy efficiency grant here. I decided to keep my coat on because it's cold. So, but again, my name is Diana, and I'm really grateful to be here. Thanks, Barry. Thanks for the whole team for putting this together, and my awesome co-panelist. But I grew up in Hampton Roads, and really my introduction to climate change was there through flooding and preparing for hurricanes. And just a bit about me, I didn't know that I could do anything about climate change until I went to college, and somebody came to visit our college from West Virginia, whose name was Larry Gibson, and told all of those students, like, you've got to come to my hometown and see what's going on, and brought us out there to witness mountaintop removal, coal mining. And that was my first introduction to a movement and to organizing. And, you know, he built a regional movement and united people in our shared power to bring an end to mountaintop removal, coal mining. And it was kind of like that was the end for me. And I've been part of movements and organizing since then, with the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and fossil fuel infrastructure movements in our state. And then before joining Clean Virginia, I helped build the National Sunrise Movement and worked as our national organizing director. And that's really where I think my journey also in this conversation begins, more around federal funding and what's happening there. So Sunrise was part of a large coalition that helped build an agenda and a mandate for federal climate policy, and worked with AOC and Senator Markey to build the Green New Deal, and then went on to work with Bernie and then later President Biden to institutionalize that into a federal policy agenda that was a pro-worker, pro-justice agenda that helped ignite a turning point towards a climate transition and would reindustrialize our country, put America back to work, and really give us the resources we need to address the crisis and address it as an opportunity we face. So I know this is a big moment. A lot of weight is on our shoulders trying to figure out what's going on, and maybe some people are also you've been busy for the last 5 years and don't know what that federal policy agenda looks like. So before we get into the threats, the basic of that was a series of unprecedented kind of level of tax credits, grants, loans from the federal government into manufacturing, into energy efficiency, into our homes and our buildings, and so many more things to build, the climate transition. And that's really what's, I think, at stake right now with the federal funding freeze, is what is going to happen to all of those dollars that are integral to so many. So, I mean, I feel like I'm up here trying to list all the different things, and it's just hard to, because it's every aspect of our lives, sustainable agriculture and transportation and manufacturing. So I'm not going to go through everything about what's happening with those dollars. I'm going to leave it a bit to all of the panelists to talk about the vantage point from different seats. But to say more about my organization and what we're up to, I think, I've gone through a lot of layers of confusion and uncertainty around what's happening federally, but something I feel really good about is just the opportunity I think we have here in Virginia to continue to move forward and to work regionally and locally. And there's a lot that I hope we'll get into there to not despair and move forward. And with Clean Virginia, to say more about the organization I work for, Clean Virginia, we work to fight utility monopoly corruption in the government specifically. So we're working a lot on the political side and a lot on the cost of energy. And there's a lot of lessons I think we can take from the 2024 election, but one thing that feels really clear is that the cost of living is going up for everyone, and that is on everyone's minds across both political parties. And a big part of that cost here in Virginia, nationwide, but especially here in Virginia, is the cost of energy. I think, honestly, every single day now, I'm in conversations with the people about their energy bills and that it's going up, and it's like, I've never seen this number on my bill before. And a big part of why that is happening here is because we have the most data centers of anywhere in the world. So Virginia has more data centers in localities than any other place in the world, in the US. And every data center can consume as much power as a mid-sized city. So we're just seeing unprecedented demand for energy in our state. And how that translates into our bills is, the cost. More energy demand means that there's less energy available and the cost goes up for everyone. It also means that our energy utilities are trying to meet that demand by building costly new energy projects. So the first thing that I'll talk about in that realm is just not too far from here, the very first of those plants is the Chesterfield gas plant that Dominion is proposed to build to be the first of 6 to plan to meet skyrocketing energy demand. And and Clean Virginia, as well as some of the orgs up here, are part of a coalition working to resist that gas plant. And I'd love to talk to anybody more around how to get involved with that. I think there's a lot that we can do to, there's a lot that's available to do before anyone needs to move forward on building out the gas plants. And then, I think the second thing I'll say is another big thing our organization focuses on around why is the cost of energy so high is also because we have a lawless campaign finance environment in Virginia, and the energy companies are able to give unlimited amounts of money to the government. And so we're looking at, since 1996, Dominion Energy has given now almost $50 million to state legislators. So why would you give $50 million to the government? It's because you can get it back, in increasing profits. But I actually feel really hopeful about this. I think just coming out of this legislative session, we've seen a lot of interest in campaign finance reform and a lot of understanding that how we fund our elections also translates directly into the cost of our daily lives, into the cost of housing, into the cost of prescription drugs, into the cost of energy. So we're also part of a building statewide coalition to work to address campaign finance reform. So that was a lot, and I wanted to put those two things forward of I moved back to Virginia last summer, and I'm really glad I did. This is my home and the place that I love, but I also feel a tremendous amount of opportunity of what we can still do and move forward here, and would love to work with so many of you all on that.
Your internal clock is incredible. You nailed it.
I did?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, first of all, I hope I have that same internal clock because I talk a lot. Hello, my friends. I'm Michael Smart with the Office of Sustainability here in the city of Richmond. Glad to be here. Glad to support wonderful organizations like Studio 23. But I think, first of all, by show of hands, how many people have heard about the Office of Sustainability before? Okay, look at this, a room full of friends. Right, and so our office is a newer office here in the city of Richmond, but really says that we believe that we want to continue to promote sustainability throughout the city of Richmond, and also make sure that we're finding ways to help our community make sure we're all living in environments that are equitable here in the city of Richmond. And so the biggest thing that we're working through is the RVA Green 2050 plan. One more time, how many show of hands, how many people have heard about RVA Green 2050? Look at this, oh my goodness. And so for those who do not know, and for my friends on camera, RVA Green says in 2050, which we just celebrated our second anniversary last week, which essentially says that the city made a plan to address climate change, right? That we know that as these last few weeks have shown, climate emergencies will happen more frequently. This week coming up, potentially, there was almost 6 to 12 inches of snow on the way, right? Those things will happen more frequently, but what the city has said that we have to have a plan to address those, and I'll get into a little bit more of that in a few seconds. However, we also need to make sure we're centering concepts around climate equity, right? Where we want to make sure that we know, and I love all these beautiful faces in the room, but this room does not always does not show the full diversity, and sadly, equity is a cuss word sometimes to some of our friends. But we know we want to promote that every place here in the city of Richmond has the same opportunity to have clean air, clean water, trees, green spaces, so they can have those opportunities to have a better life for themselves as well. And so within RVA Green, those are one of the concepts that we focus in on, but also climate resiliency as well, to say how are we shoring up our communities that we know climate change is already happening in some spaces and some things we can't change. We need to make sure that we're shoring up our communities to make sure they're prepared for those climate impacts, right? And so we've strategically connected with a lot of partners within the city to do RVA Green Green through what we call our pathways. And so RVA Greens has 5 pathways: buildings and energy, environment, transportation and mobility, waste reduction, and the one I focus a little bit more on, which is community pathway. And so in the community pathway, as my friends mentioned before, we do currently shepherd a grant program called the Neighborhood Climate Resilience Grant Program, which is here to honestly say the city is great at doing some things, but what things can we do to promote opportunities for nonprofits in the area and smaller businesses to say how can they dream about creating climate resilience in the community. And so my wonderful friends in the back, C3 was a part of the first cohort of those grant dollars where, as my friend right here was mentioning, energy burden. They're currently doing an energy burden study throughout the city of Richmond. So if you get a chance, I would definitely take a look at that survey as they're looking to promote all of this wonderful information out to the community, because I think that is another challenge right now is education. Because of so much stuff happening in the world, at times I believe there is a challenge to help. I think everybody here is very excited and understands the basics of climate change, right? You understand what I don't have to explain what sustainability to you is. But if you talk to your neighbor, sometimes if they're not they aren't always planting trees or they aren't always in these spaces, they may not always be able to define sustainability without me, having to break it down where it came from, right? So a lot of our work is to also say, how can we find ways to build bridges to community members so they can understand the intersectionality? And for intersectionality, for my friends that may not know what that word is, it's building connection to social issues that normally wouldn't always connect to each other, right? And so environmental justice is an example of that, right? Some people would say, well, we know racism has been a problem in our communities, but let's think about how racism has affected the environmental space as well, too. And so what we want to continue to do is to find ways to help raise the level of awareness in our community so they can understand why they need to continue to advocate for opportunities when it comes to clean air and climate change, but then also how they can see their communities in better spaces. One of the things I've been privileged enough in my short time here in the city of Richmond is to visit all of our districts. One of the questions I ask a lot of my friends, and I call everybody my friends because sometimes I'm bad with names, but one thing I ask is, let's talk about the South Side. We mention too many times the challenges on the South Side compared to we talk about the opportunities on the South Side. People can name, disenfranchise this, but what has made that community so resilient, right? And sometimes that, when we talk about communities in a way that make them seem like they're less than, we get surprised when they're nervous to engage us in some of these conversations. And so the grant program is, I think, a piece in that where we know sometimes our nonprofit friends have that trust and have had that time with community members to build and think what projects they need, and we're able to support some organizations in doing some great work. I also say, as I mentioned before, education is a big thing, and that our office has supported and created something called a sustainability workshop, where we offer opportunities and resources to help community members learn about sustainability, learn about climate change, learn about environmental justice, and also give us a space in some places to say, what are some steps to go from I have no idea to I have a little bit more understanding, but then also now I have a built knowledge. We've also provided some general comprehensive resources that we know are available for community members to take advantage of that are at the local level, the state level, and at the federal level. Now, we know those federal resources have diminished because of the current administration, but we continue to find opportunities to connect people to these opportunities. And then also in that space, we've had opportunities to make sure community members can learn about our commissions. How many people have heard about the Sustainability Resilience Commission? Okay, we got some few people in the room. And so one of the best opportunities for community members to get activated is to tap into commissions. And so commissions are tangible opportunities for community members to be a part of the civic development here in the city of Richmond. And so I would implore you, if you get some time, these are free and open to the public. The Sustainability Resilience Commission is one of the commissions that our offices really support and really work with. You also have the Clean City Commission, which is an organization that yields to cleanups in the city, but then also connected to DPU. You also have the Public Utility Commission. You also have the Urban Forestry Commission. And so I would implore you, as you get a chance to get involved, get into these commissions, because I think they have a great opportunity for you, not only to advocate as a community member, but I think to be knowledgeable about what's happening here in our city. And I'll leave you with this because I think my time is running. Richmond Alerts. How many people have signed up for Richmond Alerts? Come on now, not as many people. And so as we know, we have some potential snow, and who knows what will be next, right? And so Richmond Alerts is a free space for you to keep up to date about what's happening. Here in the city of Richmond, they call you. They call you pretty frequently, but they do provide a lot of information to make sure you're prepared. So as we saw some flooding more recently, and we see some snow, they're giving you information to know what's going to be impacted and where you potentially need to be prepared for as we face these challenges. And one more small plug. Actually, this Thursday, we're probably going to pivot it to virtually, but as my friend mentioned before, federal dollars was a big place, but we wanted to help people learn about here in the city of Richmond, that the Inflation Reduction Act and the American Rescue Plan were tangible resources for community members to truly fund projects that address climate change. And a lot of places created opportunities for departments and organizations to really dream about changing our communities. But because of where we currently are with our federal government, things have pivoted. And so we're excited to bring Amy Turner in from the Columbia Center for Climate Change to talk about how to navigate climate funding in this situation. Because of the snow, again, as I said before, we're probably pivoted to virtual, but those are some ways that we want to make sure we're sharing resources. I think that's one of the biggest things in Office of Sustainability we want to continue to yield to, is how can we be a central hub to share out what we know, to share best practices to community members, and we can all address these issues in a collaborative way. And I'll leave you with one quote that my fraternity brother said, that it was, we want to fight until hell freezes over. And then we want to fight on ice, right? You got to get your ice skates together, because we got some challenging times coming ahead. So thank you so much, and excited to be here.
Good evening. I'm Jenny Moran. I'm the Central Virginia Field Manager at Virginia League of Conservation Voters. We are a state affiliate of the national org LCV, and we have been working for the last 2 years, 3 years now, to promote these programs that Michael just talked about, the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, educating the public on all of these amazing opportunities coming. So yeah, we've got a lot of work to do to see what's gonna move forward. I live in Chesterfield, where they're building the gas plant. I grew up in Henrico, and I've worked and lived all over the city of Richmond. My background was mostly in the service industry, and for a while I worked as a doula, advocating with families who wanted to practice an evidence-based maternal care and birth. And so I became more involved in advocacy and activism around 2019, and in 2020, I was lucky enough to be hired by the League to work as a temporary seasonal employee that year on the presidential election of 2020. And we were, trying to communicate all of the new election policy in Virginia, the expansion of voting laws, that you could now vote 45 days early voting, no excuse absentee ballot, and also offering other pandemic-related resources. And then I came on full-time in 2022 as Governor Youngkin was taking office. And so my experience has been defending all of our state policies under Governor Youngkin, the Virginia Clean Economy Act, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and the Clean Car Standards, which were all passed in 2020 under a conservation majority in Virginia. And so we're very worried about the seas of funds, but my experience defending the state policy with support from folks like you has been incredible, and we're hopeful that we can leverage that energy here in Virginia, because we have $4 billion worth of investments coming to Virginia, and we have people on both sides of the aisle who want to see that come to fruition. There's a Norfolk flood wall. There's projects that you might be aware of, like electric school buses and the SCEP funding, which would have improved conditions at Richmond Public Schools. And there's investments to the Chesapeake Bay and wildlife. And so, you know, with all of these programs come jobs, and we're confident that we can defend these programs and keep these opportunities coming to Virginia. And we also have a very big election coming up this year. Virginia League of Conservation is the political voice of the environmental community. The conservation voter movement works to build power in states for clean energy, climate action, and a stronger democracy. So we definitely want someone put in the governor's seat this year who believes in clean energy. We have all of our delegate seats up for election, and we want to make sure that our climate champions in Congress stay where they are. And so most of you probably live in the Congressional 4th District, which is Congresswoman McClellan's office. And she's a climate champion. She was the author of the Clean Economy Act, and she's doing her part in DC for us. But she needs to hear from you. Even our climate champions, they need to always hear the narrative that clean energy is important to their constituents. With the current economy, there's so many competing priorities, but affordability comes with clean energy. And, you know, there's talking points that are easy on the other side, that it's too much of an investment, but that's just simply not true. So we're counting on everyone in this room to get that message out to your neighbors, to your family members who might be stuck and struggling, you know, just spreading the word of intersectionality and how climate action can touch your pocketbook, your kids' schools, and bring healthy communities for everyone is so important. And I'll talk more later about democracy actions that we have over at our table, but I want to hand it over to Faith.
Hi, is it on? Yeah. Hi, I'm Faith Harris. I am the Executive Director for Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, and I've been in that role since full-time since 2022. But I've been part of the relaunch. Kendall Crawford, many of you know her. She and I were two of the folk who relaunched Virginia Interfaith Power and Light in 2015. It was an organization started and founded in 2004, but kind of lost its way a little bit and waned in terms of its work for several years. And in 2015, when we decided to relaunch the organization, we relaunched it with the lens of environmental justice, climate and environmental justice, because we recognize and truthfully believe that we're not going to solve the climate problem, climate crisis, unless we also include people who have been most impacted. And that's actually where we believe we should start the work, and that that if we're doing that work there and if we're resolving the issues there, then we're in fact making it possible for all the other issues to be addressed at the same time. And so that, you know, working with the belief that by doing to use a kind of religious, traditional way of saying it, but by caring for the least of these, that we actually are all actually meeting the needs of all of us. And because once we have solved the problems for the most vulnerable, we actually are at the same time benefiting those who may not necessarily be in the same kind of need. We collaborate with people of faith and good conscience. grow healthy communities and to address the issues of climate change and environmental justice, injustice. And one of the things that that we think is really important is to recognize how all of life, the interconnectedness of all of life, and that once we are doing that work together as people of faith and as community members with working together, that we can actually make a difference in the world in a way that actually addresses the issues of climate change, not just climate change, but the issues of poverty, the issues of communities that have been plagued with a number of pathologies because they're low wealth communities, because they have been either neglected or maybe even disproportionately burdened because of decisions that were made decades ago. So the work that we do is we kind of talk about it and think about it in three different buckets of work. We do education, which is really an important aspect of our work. We're working with faith communities of every background, trying to help them understand, first to make connections with them, with their own faith tradition around their relationship to the earth, to climate, to what it means to be a citizen of this planet. What we have found is that most traditions have some way in which, caring for the environment, caring for earth, caring for neighbor are priorities, either by principle or doctrine or just because, that's how they understand their purpose as a tradition. And then the other part of our work is education, but it's also to organize, to help communities that are in the struggle to fight against either new fossil fuel infrastructure. We're very involved in the work and the fight against the ACP, and we're very involved with the community in Buckingham County, as well as we were very involved as a team in Bristol, helping that community address toxic fumes coming from a quarry landfill. And we're in Matthews County working to help that community address resilience due to sea level rise. So we work all across the state helping communities resist and to amplify their voices around the issues that are impacting them most. And then we do some good portion of our work is also advocacy. So we're right now in the middle of General Assembly. We have a few bills that we are promoting and that we prioritize. And so those are the three major ways that we're involved in this work to eradicate climate change and to address the impacts of climate change. And we recognize that we believe that the influence of faith communities is a really important and has been an absent voice in many of our struggles, in many of the communities that have been doing this work for a very long time. And that if we can awaken the influence and the power of faith communities to join with the rest of the climate community to use their influence to encourage our leaders, not just our political leaders, but also our corporate leaders, to actually do the work of resilience, doing the work of sustainability, doing the work of taking responsibility, not only through legislation, but also in the corporate policies that we can actually make the changes that are necessary. We're very involved in and put a lot of hours in it started out as Build Back Better, and it morphed into the Inflation Reduction Act, and then also the inflation,
Bipartisan.
Yeah, the bipartisan, there's so many acronyms, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. We put a lot of hours into that work, seeing those two bills get passed and make their way through Congress. And we were incredibly excited about what that meant for communities on the ground, for communities that particularly around Justice 40, communities that had never had real meaningful attention or support, and in the form of dollars, right? In the form of trying to address some of the systemic and long-time historic needs for things like green space, parks, for things like addressing energy burden, addressing sea level rise and flooding. So there were just a number of ways that that funding could really make the difference and actually bring into kind of the public square communities that have long been ignored and or disproportionately impacted because of policies, because of decisions made either through legislation or by helped by legislation by some of our polluters. We're very disappointed, and I think that's a mild way of saying how we feel. And in many ways, we're not 100% sure what all the ramifications are, what are the consequences of all the decisions that are being made one day and taken back and brought back, and all of the indecision coming out of D.C. I know that one of the things that I'm hearing from not just coalition partners here in Virginia, but across the United States. We're part of an organization that has 40 affiliates, that we're talking about how we can fight back, how we can use the influence of faith communities to contact and to be in conversation with their legislators in D.C. to actually to see them move and to stand up in a more meaningful and vocal way against what's happening through this administration. So we have a lot of work to do in that realm, but we know that when people on the ground, grassroots power, when people use their voices to and bring them together to actually work for the good, that we can actually make the change. We've seen it historically, we've seen it recently, so we know that there's quite a bit of work to do. And looking at this room tonight, it is heartening to see that there are people that are concerned. There's probably, for every one of you, there's probably 10 others that just didn't make it tonight. And I think one of the things that I would like us to do is to consider all the ways as individuals we can, help promote the narrative that working together is the way that we're going to address and make it through the next 4 years. That we can't. As I was on my way here this afternoon, I was thought, what do I think is the forecast? Well, one of the things that I think is most important is that, oftentimes we, I think there's a part of what's happening is a strategy to kind of overwhelm us and with either fear or passivity or a sense of we can't fight against this, it's too strong. But I also think that there's a danger in it causing us to split from one another. And I think the most important thing is to ensure that we are staying in communication, that we're talking to one another, that we're sharing information, and that we're showing up for not just events like this, but that we're showing up for the fight in Chesterfield, for some of the other things that we know are going to be coming down the pike. and some of the ways that, not just around climate, but some of the ways that we will have to show up for our immigrant neighbors, for people for trans community, for all the communities that are kind of on the chopping block or are the I guess the scapegoats for this administration. I think we all need to bring our voices together and find ways to be supportive and to kind of become a wall against, I'm lost for words because there's a lot of bad words want to come out of my mouth. So I can't say those words, but in this setting, but I do want to say that I think really working together as community is really probably our best answer, and not allowing ourselves to be driven back into our homes into silence, but using our voices, using our bodies, using our the power that we do have to show up for one another.
Amazing. Round of applause. You guys are brilliant. We are basically right on time. We have a planned 10-minute break here for folks to go to the bathroom, which are downstairs, hit the food truck, get some water, get a drink, visit with tablers, or write questions on this giant piece of paper in the back of the room. We will be back here at 6:10 to start the Q&A portion. So please get up, stretch, visit our food truck that came here for free. Lots of vegan options. So we have a few questions that have come up in different ways on this wall over here, and also from conversations that happened before tonight. One of the first questions is about local power. There's a lot of conversations happening right now about local government, the local level, in Richmond in particular, our new mayor, our new city council, and what they can do. So I'm curious what you think the key sort of battlegrounds are for the next 4 years with the Avula administration, and what you think are priorities and are where we need to focus in that time.
Well, so I'll speak from an officer's standpoint. I'd love to hear my advocacy friends talk from their standpoint. I think the biggest thing, number one, is let's be honest. I think some people need some civic lessons out here, right? Our local governments are probably the easiest and fastest ways for us to see change in a lot of spaces, right? But because of how, I think, and we see it currently, how dominating the narrative at the federal level is, I think sometimes people forget about how collective and how close-knit they are to potentially, I mean, in an arm's reach you can be to the mayor, right, or be to your elected official. And so I think, first of all, helping people learn that there are tangible ways for you to get involved. There are tangible ways for you to show up to your city council meeting. There are tangible ways for you to read Richmond 300, right? When the city is working through plans and having conversations with community members, Richmond 300 is the guiding light, right? And at times, people are maybe not as aware as we would like them to be about Richmond 300 because it's such a large document. RVA Green is 500 plus pages. Who am I to tell you to sit down in a day and read 500 plus pages? But what I do say is get a chance to learn, and I mentioned in my last comments about these public commissions. These are tangible ways for you to learn, petition to city council, to actually be in the room. For anybody that been to these SRC meetings or even clean city commission meetings, you have this almost communal, for lack of a better term, vibe, where you can actually talk to people who are at the front lines of addressing these changes. And so I would really implore people to really get involved in our commissions, and as much as they possibly can, as they learn, share the message. Because I think another place and space is this disinformation about what you can and cannot do as a community member, or what you can and cannot do as a resident. There's some tangible ways that all of us can be involved, but because of what we may see that somebody in California may be doing, that may not be actually tangible here in the city of Richmond, right? And so really get a chance to, I think, really tap into these commissions is a big opportunity for people to get involved and truly push to be the change that they want to see.
Sure. I'll be fast on this one. And again, so Clean Virginia, we focus mostly at the state level, so I'll speak to a few things there, but yes, all that on the city level, and then it can be really lonely to do this work. You have a lot of power, and my sense is join an organization and join in the power of joining together with your community. I think I love the folks tabling here, and the things I talked about most were our opportunities to push back against a growing fossil fuel infrastructure agenda, and also against increased cost of our elections and campaign finance reform. The gas plant, there's a ton of awesome organizations who are working to stop that gas plant, and your question of like how and where over the next year. Well, let me back up. Friends of Chesterfield is the local organization in Chesterfield County that's been leading this fight at the local level. For folks who live over there, you can join Friends of Chesterfield, but also Sunrise RVA is part of that, LCV is part of that. We've got Lee back there with, Lee, what's your organization name? She's talking.
Beyond Methane.
Beyond Methane, thank you. But there's a strong statewide coalition that's in building and has a united plan to kind of target both the Department of Environmental Quality and then the state regulator and also the legislature. So there's several sites where our influence is really powerful, and in organizations that are leading that work in coalition. So join an organization, don't do it alone, and we have a lot of power together. And then on the campaign finance side, similar structure. Clean Virginia is part of that, and we're part of a statewide coalition. That is a legislative battle, so we'll be putting a lot of pressure on the legislature. But again, those folks listen, and the more we work together, the more power we have.
Definitely organize at the local level. I was part of a group in Chesterfield a few years back. We went to the school board and we requested that they adopt a model policy for trans students, and they did. Since then, they've been pressured to overthrow that, to overturn that and to adopt the Youngkin model policy, but that's just one example. On the flip side, you will see local governments that cannot or will not act and insert themselves into decisions that are very controversial. So if they can pass that buck, oftentimes they will. In Chesterfield, the Board of Supervisors is also receiving emails from Dominion employees, and the emails say there's 2,000 of us who live in Chesterfield. So in that case, there's a lot of state agency engagement opportunity that folks might not be aware of. We see that this might need to be stopped at the SCC and DEQ level, the State Corporation Commission and the Department of Environmental Quality. And those agencies have public comment periods that will be coming up. And the good news is that if the local officials don't stop this project, and that if it's stopped at SCC or DEQ level, they could make an overarching decision that stops other future projects that are similar. But shout out to Councilwoman Catherine Jordan. She has amazing community meetings on a monthly basis, I believe. So get involved with your district, get involved with one of the nonprofits in this room, and build your power at every level, local, state, and federal, is what I would say.
So I would agree with everything that we've heard so far, and I really talk about this quite a bit, that civic engagement is not just what we do in the voting booth, right? If we're not, after the elections are over, staying engaged, following the decisions that our elected officials make, showing up during General Assembly, showing up in their district offices, showing up at council meetings, educating ourselves as much as possible about the laws. For instance, one of the perfect example, I think, we're in this part of this situation with, and I don't want to, I'm C3, so I have to be very careful how I say this, but when during the last gubernatorial election, it was very clear, Governor Youngkin was very clear, well, he wasn't the governor, but the candidate was very clear in what he wanted to do with RGGI. And most people did not understand what the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative was. So because they didn't understand it, they didn't understand what impact it would actually have on all of the policies going forward in terms of how we are reducing our carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions in the state, and what kind of benefit that the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative had already accomplished for Virginians. And because people were unaware and didn't understand it, they fell for the narrative that it was costing you, it was bringing, increasing your electric bills and your energy burden. And in fact, the average increase was like $1.50, something like that. And I think the highest was about $4 on a person's, on an individual bill. And so that, I think, happened because we don't pay attention to and know and understand all of what's at stake in our elections. And I think, reading a 500-page report or plan is, kind of oppressive. We need to find ways as organizations and city entities to make these palatable and available and accessible to people who work 40, 50 hours a week, have children that are trying to, keep their sanity on a day-to-day basis. And so I do feel like in some ways we have the nonprofits and agencies have a lot more responsibility that we need to make sure that we are making it and putting it in language and putting it in places, making it available to community members so that they can understand it and understand what's at stake. And I think we're in this situation in coming out of DC because people really did not understand, really didn't believe that this could actually happen. And now we are all in the soup together. And it's a very stinky, horrible soup. So the one thing we should do is become much more engaged and not continue with the practice of going into the voting booth and going home and not paying attention. We have to pay attention. We have to educate ourselves. We have to stay involved. And we have to hold our elected officials accountable to what they believe them when they say they're going to do something, and hold them accountable for when they make the wrong decisions.
Awesome. I think we're going to open the floor to questions. Ashley has a wireless mic that she can bring around. Panelists, so that we can get to a few of these before we wrap, I'll ask you to just keep your responses really short. We don't necessarily need to hear from everybody on every question, but if you have something to add, please do add it.
Hello. This ties into what Reverend Harris was just saying, and that is to keep people informed. And what would you say is the best, most central source of information? If you wanted us to help you get your word out on efforts and campaigns, what would you point us to?
I wish there was like the central, good guy website. That would be really helpful. We definitely would love for you to come over to our table, check out what we have. My Deputy Director of Advocacy and Campaigns, Sarah Ahmed, is at the table. We have an election coming up, and it's really important. So if you can sign up for actions, that's great, but on an everyday basis, you can be our messengers, like I was saying earlier, and you can help educate people around you who didn't want to come out to vote last time. They didn't think there was anything at stake for them. They didn't find a connection with anyone. You need to, help us get the message out about clean energy, but also about the use of our democracy and not taking that privilege for granted. At our table tonight, we have a petition to automatically restore everyone's right to vote upon release from incarceration. Yeah, so there's 3 constitutional amendments moving forward in the General Assembly. One is on marriage equality, one is on reproductive rights and protections, and the third would be to automatically restore these rights. Many people do not know that we are the only state left in the union still disenfranchising voters. This is Jim Crow era law. And so there's a lot of education that we need to get out there because it'll go through the General Assembly once more. And then in 2026, it would be on the public ballot. And so in the 1980s, this legislation flew through the General Assembly, but failed 2-1 on the ballot. So we'll be doing lots of events around that in the next couple years, giving the perspective and telling second chance stories to the community. So we appreciate your support.
No, I just want to say every one of these organizations, the tables, have newsletters. Sign up for our newsletters. The city has a newsletter and a website. So sign up to learn what we're doing and stay involved. And when we invite you to these events, come out and bring 10 people with you. RVAgreen2050.com. We also just created a new Tracy model to provide live updates about the progress of RVA Green and where we are with different action items, because within RVA Green, it's not just our office shepherding each of these steps. We're office of 10, so to do that would be a lot. So it gives you space to see where we are in the progress. And then also we have a wonderful newsletter that goes out monthly that is not bothersome, but provides you a good amount of information.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to circle back to the question about what can we do with the current administration here in the city. And I would just say, encourage everyone to contact the mayor's office and city council. We're entering the budget season. Remind all of the electives, myself included, look, you guys said you were going to support an independent department of transportation. Transportation has a huge impact on climate. Where is it? Make sure that that happens in the budget. The energy burden. What are you doing to help Richmonders with their energy burden? Natural gas prices are fluctuating widely. I'm pretty sure Dr. Avola committed to looking at our gas works. Really push those people. And then, to what's already been said, the statewide elections are huge. Imagine if we had a Democratic Attorney General. Imagine if we had a Democratic governor. So don't sleep on that opportunity. It's hard. Knock on doors, talk to people. Your being here obviously makes a huge difference also. So anyway, I just wanted to circle back to that and really make a push for it. Thanks.
For those of you who don't know, that's Catherine Jordan, our 2nd District City Council person. Are there other questions in the room tonight? Yes.
I just had a really quick follow-up question for Jenny. On the petition, and I'm a little new to Virginia, so I don't know all the processes. Is this a petition to get it on the ballot, or is this a general support petition in terms of the restoring rights to?
Our petition is specific to our organization, but we're definitely sharing that data with stakeholders and decision makers. And it's also a way for us to keep in touch with you on, the progress of the legislation and other actions and events that come around about it. Thank you. It has to pass the General Assembly one more time to answer your question, and then it will be on the ballot.
Hello, thank you guys for being here, and everyone else. So I just have a question on what are some strategies you would suggest in engaging with other community members who either A, don't really place the importance on environmental issues, or they flat out don't think they are an issue? Because I think with right now, with this administration, there's just folks you can talk to who are like, that's not real, I don't believe it, and they voted for what is in office right now. So how would you suggest kind of approaching that? Because I feel like that's something I keep coming up to a wall with.
I just want to say real quick, I was talking about this last night, and there are definitely those people out there that you cannot convince. Racist people are going to be racist, and climate deniers are going to deny climate change. But what we really need to focus on are the people who didn't come out at all last year. And so empowering those communities that are usually ignored, those are the people we really need to bring in.
There are a lot of climate deniers in the religious faith world, right? And they have good doctrine for why they can deny it. They think they have good doctrine. It's not really good doctrine. But I don't really spend a lot of energy and time trying to convince people who don't believe what's in front of their faces. You know, I think when the effort and the energy we should spend it on people who are actually in experiencing the impacts of climate change and climate injustice. And I think we also should try to strengthen the voices of those who are in the fight. And I think there is plenty of energy and need in those to do that work and to not, beat our head against the wall for people who are not going to change. I think that there probably are people who are experiencing flooding and the wildfires, and they will, once it's at their doorstep, that will help them, awaken them to what's really going on. But I think the more that we spend time encouraging and helping to support those who may not have all the information but know something is wrong, that's where I think we should, spend our energies.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I'd say we engage people a lot on cost of living issues, and I think I'm finding that there's a lot of room to engage on that, and sometimes I think when you say these people there's no way to engage, my sense is, can we dig a little deeper and see what the real issue is here, and can we try to practice learning to understand what is challenging in many people's lives and how we experience that in different ways. I think in Virginia, I'll say about the legislative sessions going on right now, one of the biggest surprises to me in the legislative session has been a coalition of Republican senators from Southwest Virginia who have come together to put a lot of pressure on the state regulator and published a letter end of last week saying, why are our energy bills so high? And they're asking the regulator, basically, how can we get a different energy company in our region because we think this one's abusing us? And there's a profile that went out end of last week in Cardinal News, which is Southwest Virginia news network. And, I think a company that takes from all of us benefits no one. And there's common ground there. So finding that common ground and teaming up around how we're hurting differently, I think, is what I'm trying to do.
And I'll say one thing too. I think another question, I was just talking to a wonderful council member about this, is what do we do when we get to our told you so moment? Do we kick them out of the tent or do we welcome them back in, right? And that is going to be the question. Do we gloat and say, you're the reason why we're here? but knowing that it's going to continue to get worse. It's going to continue to get worse. How do we respond?
Yeah.
Do we respond to opportunities, or do we respond and shun them or treat them the way they treated us? And I know specifically for our friends in the faith community, we want to treat people the way that we want to be treated, right? And so I think that's something to center as well, too. How do we respond when it's going to get too hot? Your favorite river will not be your favorite river anymore, potentially, right? How do we respond?
Thank you. My name's Ellis Sawyer, and I've been trying to narrow this question down. As you may notice, I'm the only one that looks like me in this room, and it's a little bit concerning, mostly because of just what's happened in the beginning of this year and the last few weeks. People who look like me have been the most affected. Without power, flooding, all of it, poor water that's been happening for what seems to be now more than just the beginning of this year. So what I'm curious about, really trying to narrow this down, is how do we keep equity in the conversation? Because that seems what's at stake. I feel like there was a lot of stuff in the bill that kept changing acronyms that was slightly more progressive, and I think what lost and what keeps getting cut off is the equity point, and what keeps is the restorative and the reparative stuff keeps getting pushed to the side and forgotten. And so I guess that's my question. How do we keep equity in the conversation, and how do we bring the conversation and uplift the voices that are most affected?
Yeah, I'm gonna say first we have to really do a better job of showing that. Specifically, I'm a black man, so I'm gonna say specifically we really have to be a parent to show communities that look like me, that I'm from Newport News, that I went to HBCU, that show communities that we've always been in this fight. Right, that this is not just some, just people that love trees, or this is not just more of a people with an affinity or have that opportunity and time to come to these types. It's not just a fight. We've always been here, and I think to help to build that bridge is a step, not the biggest step, but I think a step in the right direction. I think also another opportunity is to show that some of our nonprofit friends have been doing this work for so long, right? And have not had that funding background to actually do the work because they're fighting just to maintain their baseline. And so I think also to find strategic ways, as you mentioned before, Faith, to partner, to provide opportunities for funding to be a part of the conversation. Because without money, a lot of these programs and initiatives to bring people in the conversation won't be a part of the opportunity to make the change that we want. And so I think to strategically partner with organizations that uniquely have not had the opportunity to be in this conversation because they're focused on housing injustice, so they're focusing in on prison reform, right? Because of those historical issues, they haven't seen themselves here. And so I think it builds a lot of responsibility on our offices like myself to say, how can we show people that this is not a new fight, this is a long-standing fight. And there are some tools now to make sure you actually can fight with a chance. Our office is working on, we just had an environmental justice event last week to help start to get people to see the places of injustice in our communities, but then also to show places and spaces where organizations are fighting to provide opportunities that can help with food insecurity on the South Side, can provide opportunities for energy burdens on the East End, right? But the challenge that we face is that so many other social issues rise to the higher level of importance for our communities because, man, I'm just trying to eat. But if I can show you that what you're eating is also a part of long term of this conversation here, I think that helps bring people into this space more. But we have to build those bridges. We have to intentionally build those bridges. And I think it's some wonderful organizations that's doing that, but we just got to keep hitting the pavement harder. So, yeah.
I'd like to add to that I think a couple of weeks ago, I had a LTE published, and I talked about how the environmental justice movement is finishing the work of the civil rights movement, and that even Martin Luther King he died in Memphis because he was there to fight for the city sanitation workers who were fighting an environmental justice fight. So it's not a new fight. It is part of the long struggle for equity and for justice in this country for people of color. And which is the reason why we chose, when we relaunched Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, we chose environmental justice because we really do believe that if we actually address these long-standing historic justice issues, we actually can build a better world. You know, I am an idealist. I don't make any apologies for that. I actually believe that the world could be a really great place for all of us if we choose to make it so. And I believe, one of the other concerns that I have that is part of what we see coming out of DC is the willingness of so many to capitulate to some of the most racist and egregious, evil kinds of narratives, but also actions. And I think, which is why I said what I said before, I think that it is all of our responsibility to understand the righteousness of this struggle. That this is not, when and I hate to say it this way, but when the current governor became our governor, many of our coalition members were like, oh, let's back off from using the word equity. Let's back off from using environmental justice for fear of, it's not popular because this governor is anti it. But it's a righteous struggle. We're not asking for something that is undeserved. Right? We're not asking for something that is, we're not asking for anything that's evil. We're asking for a common good that everyone will benefit from. It does not benefit the wealthy. It really doesn't benefit the wealthy. Well, maybe the 1%, but it doesn't benefit those who are middle class and upper middle class, that parts of their cities are in disrepair. It affects their lives as well. And so I think that if we understand it from that perspective, that this is a moral, just cause, and that if we are willing to capitulate and run away from it, we don't know what manner of evil will befall all of us. And I don't want to sound like the Debbie Downer in the room or the extremist, but I think we have to be very careful to not allow ourselves to be silenced, to not run away from what we know is a good. And not just a good for some, but actually a good for all of us. And so I hear you, which is one of the reasons why we chose environmental justice, why we work with faith communities. A lot of the work we try to do is to awaken that sense of justice, even in the African American churches who have lost it as well, because they have fallen prey to, a passivity that is not. That's not actually helpful to the people that sit on their pews every week. And I don't have any qualms about telling them that too. This is a challenging work, but it's all of our work. And I think if all of us would recognize that we have not just a great responsibility, but that we'll actually have a great benefit from staying involved, I think we can see the change that we all need. And I think we can hold out for the next 4 years. That's what we have to do. We have to resist long enough to make it past the next 4 years. And while we're resisting, learning and strategizing so that when the time comes that we can make a different decision, that we're all actually engaged and involved, and we won't fall for, the smoke screen again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was like, we should just end on Faith's words because those were powerful. But I really appreciate the question. I did want to respond and offer something I've been thinking about a lot, and coming from the fight for the Green New Deal in that era, that was the Green New Deal in many ways was an attempt to transform the national conversation on climate policy to put racial justice and economic justice at the heart of our policy agenda. And we won a lot. And I think the thing I want to say, well, let me say about a few things we won. You know, we won the energy communities tax credit that said if you build here where our communities need it most, you can get more money. We won labor tax credits that said if you're good on labor and you're building projects, you can get more money. We won the Justice 40 initiative that said 40% of all federal investments should go to the communities who need it most. And the thing I want to say to try to wrap up and for all of us to hold is it's really important in this time to not take the wrong lessons from this moment. And something I'm hearing and have been hearing is, you know, you guys went too far. You went too far. It's too much. We weren't ready for it. And that, my lesson is we didn't go far. We didn't go far enough. And how to keep holding on to real storytelling about our people and the impacts that we are committed to delivering and staying true to deep systemic reform. Like, we didn't go far enough. And through this next 4 years, there's going to be a lot of trying to draw lessons from how we got here, and my sense is how do we all hold that going forward of let's not take the wrong lessons from this moment, so we're pulling back from that commitment.
Amazing. Thank you, Diana, Michael, Jenny, Faith, for coming out tonight and sharing some of your wisdom with us. Thank you all for coming out on this chilly night. Please feel free to hang out in this space, visit with tablers, get more food, wander around downstairs, take a peek around. Thank you so much for coming out.